I remember people talking so much shit about Lupita Nyong'o before she won an Oscar and saying that she wasn't Latina. She calls herself a Chilonga because she's from, Mexico City. And they were like,
Mhm.
she's not a Chilonga. She's this, she's that. And after she won that Oscar, they were like, oh, we love Lupita. Look at our Latina queen. Now she's on all the blogs and they put her picture. And it feels disingenuous. And
Yeah.
I mean, obviously with her too, you don't ever see her reposting that foolishness because she knows what they did to her before. Jarrell Jerome, like out here killing it, and Dominican, and just it's like it just is this tone deafness of wanting to be, white people to like you so much, and it's like the white people who are good people and real people gonna like you if you like yourself, bitch.
Oh my gracious.
Even back in high school, Jennifer inspired more than
Y cambié la imagen por vender bitcoins.
Come on, shake your body, baby, do that conga.
Oh, let me see your nails.
They're gold.
Yes. I had gold on for like almost 4 years straight. That was like my signature, was the gold nails. I love, love,
Oh,
love
really?
gold.
Yeah, this is
Yep.
my nails is how I pick myself up. That's one of my pick me ups is going to get my nails done and doing something, like symbolic for me.
Yes. I love gold. That's my favorite color. So I'm glad to see
Mm.
somebody else representing the Gold Nail Club. I don't have it on today, but struggle's real. But thank you for coming on the show, Aida Rodriguez, coming on Growing Up Latina. I guess I want to kick it off to like the Sala vibes, right? So
Okay.
what was your Sala like? Paint me that picture. What music would you listen to? What was some of the food that you were eating? What
It's
was the
really
novelas you were watching?
wow, novela con mi abuela. It's funny, the sala vibes, depending on which sala I was in, right? Because I was always between my mother and my grandmother's place. And my mother's sala was, where my siblings and I would hang out. And it was always fun as long as the adults were not around. But it was different. So when the adults were around, there was Hector Lavoe, El Gran
Yes.
Combo playing, Johnny Ventura, you know, the old school vibes. Then when they were not in the room, you could hear anything from like Duran Duran to rock bass, hip hop and 80s music, because I loved 80s music growing up. And pop music. At the time, it was pop music. It wasn't even considered 80s music. But yeah, you would hear that. And then the food was always very fusion because on any given day, era arroz con salchicha, which I don't really like. I don't eat pork. So
Yeah.
eh, my mom was really creative because we were poor. So some days she would make arroz con vegetales and
Hmm.
but it was so tasty, right? And then she would make a salad of tomatoes and aguacate.
Love
And
that.
this is cool, like just remembering those things. But there's always maltas in the refrigerator because I was the malta head. I love maltas.
Did you make, and I'm just wondering, have you ever made a Malta milkshake, which is the Malta with the condensed milk, and then you will blend it? Did you make that?
Yeah, my mom calls it ponche. And
Okay,
so
okay.
yes, and for some reason I was anemic. I've always been anemic as a kid. They were like, "This is good for your anemia." They would put eggs in it. It's like there's no way all that sugar could be good for anybody, but hey, whatever made them feel better.
It's so funny. Mama used to make corned beef con arroz blanco. And
Sí,
I would be like, Mommy, I don't want that. That's jail food. She's like, Girl, do you know the food they get in jail? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you gonna eat this corned beef. I said, all right, okay.
yeah,
But
no, sure.
what was like your first like intro to music?
Oh, that was
Particularly like Latin music.
so very young, and
Yeah.
some of it not even conscious for me. My father, who I lived with in the Dominican Republic when I was a little baby and a little girl, was a musician, and he was in a merengue band. So my introduction to music was very young. I actually have on this computer a song that he recorded for me when I was a baby, and that I hadn't heard for a really long time. But so my introduction to music was very young, and it was always very, like I said, Hector Lavoe, El Gran Combo, Johnny Ventura, Mili Los Vecinos, Las Chicas del Can. Like that was my introduction to music, was very much the music that my parents were listening to, that my uncles and my grandmother were listening to.
Yeah. What do I have to understand about your earliest years to understand the woman that you are today?
I would say that my earliest years were very um I don't like to say chaotic because I try not to add a negative connotation to what people were doing because they had to do to survive. But it was very active. Yeah, bien activo. You know, a lot of
Yeah.
movement. My father got deported, so we went to the Dominican Republic. And so I learned early on to move, to stay in movement, not to freeze in conflict, but to move. Like if something is doesn't look good, then move on. Like just keep going. And I see when I do that now, being able to identify where that came from has been very helpful for me, because I always wonder, like, why do I just keep going and instead of stopping? And some people I know will stop and they like take it in. As you said, your therapist was saying, you know, you got to stop working to heal or whatever.
Yes.
I've always been one to stay in motion.
You know, you and I, we have a lot of similarities. One,
Hmm.
we're Puerto Rican and Dominican.
Hmm.
And then two, and this just happened recently for me. And this is really why I gravitate towards you on a deeper level. So back in February, I actually saw my dad for the first time in 11 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it had been 11 years, and it stemmed from, you know, me going through a breakup
Mm.
and wanting answers, like, why are men like this, you know? And I don't know why this actually happened, but I text him for answers, and he was like, just come to Puerto Rico. And when I saw him, we didn't know whether to like hug each other, like we didn't know because it had been such a long time. And then I was, you know, reading up on, you know, your background and your story, and then you did a whole documentary on you reconnecting with your dad. And I wonder, what was that process like for you? Because for me, I became like a daddy's girl, almost like a daddy's little girl. And I actually healed that relationship with my dad, but I'm wondering what it did for you when you actually reconnected with your father.
So we're still in the process of, you know, healing. 11 years is a long time. But that means that 11 years ago you had a relationship with your dad, where the last relationship I had with my dad I didn't remember because I was so young. So when I reconnected with my father, it was like meeting an absolute stranger. And you know, it was very awkward as well. You know, he didn't hug me because he didn't want to be intrusive. I felt like, man, he hasn't seen his daughter in so many years and he didn't hug me. And you know, I'm still healing, I'm still processing, I'm still working through it and giving him and myself grace while we're doing it. But I definitely am better for it. I feel like a piece of me. I met myself in the Dominican Republic, in a place that I had never met myself before, and that is a gift. You know, I am thankful for that. I'm grateful for it.
The, I guess, the thought process in documenting this.
Mm.
Why did you decide that you wanted to turn this into a documentary and just document the entire journey?
You know, I wanted to destigmatize the thing about Latino men, fathers. I wanted to humanize the experience. There's always been this running joke. You know, in a comedy world, jokes don't have a lot of filter, especially when comedians are amongst comedians. And, you know, I see a lot of comedians, it's even women of color, people of color, bragging and boasting about how they have their fathers, you know, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I was a really uncommon person of color. I know my father. And, I think that I wanted to humanize that experience. I wanted other people who were feeling that, who had not been with their fathers or mothers, who had a missing parent. I wanted to chronicle the journey so that it could have some humanity. I wanted to release some people from the shame because it's not something I would normally do. People tend to take me a little more seriously than they do other comedians. And, my friends and family were like, I never thought you would ever do that because that's just not the vibe that you give. But I wanted to free some people, and I wanted other women and other people who have experienced not having their parent there to know that is very common for many people, not just people of color. And I also wanted to see it because I knew that while I was in it, there was no way I was going to be able to process it in real time. So for me, it was just being able to go back and watch it and see it because I was not in my body in that moment. I was completely
Yeah.
numb.
And what was that process like for you to just watch everything back?
You know, awkward. It
Yeah.
was, you
Yeah.
know, I'm not just seeing that grown up Ida. I'm seeing that little girl that for so many years was wondering where her father was, why he didn't come get me. How could you just go? How could August 29th just pass by your rate on your radar and you not go into action? Like you had a little girl out in the world that you never sought after, and I wanted to know why. And so when I saw it, I could see little me, and my mannerisms just reverting back to that childhood where I got really awkward. And I'm believing that is part of my healing.
I also want to say it will be, and it is that journey. For me, I think one of the things that I took away was like right after I came back well, I really wanted to extend my trip to Puerto
Hmm.
Rico. And my dad was like, no, you need to go and like close this chapter of your life. Like, go through what you're going through. And then once you go through it, then I'll extend your trip. If that's what you want, you can come back, whatever, whatever. The minute I landed back in New York, he immediately sends me a text and he's like, Buenos dias, mi reina. And for me, like just speaking that type of validation into me, that made a world of a difference for me. I was like, where was this all along? And the way that he explained at least my process with why he left, it wasn't much of an explanation, Ida. It
Hmm.
was what he said was esas son cosas jovencito. Like that's what young people do. And I
Hmm.
still couldn't really understand that. And then you referred to Louise Hay and the book, You Can Heal Your Life. And pretty much her saying like, think back to like, it'll be helpful if you think back to when your parents were young and
That's
how
right.
they must have felt. And I had to remove myself as Alexandra, the daughter, to
Hmm.
now like Ernesto, the dad. Who was he when he was younger? His
Yeah.
parents didn't love him, right? So did you have an opportunity to kind of remove yourself from Ida, the daughter, to now your dad as the younger version of himself?
Yeah, I did that after I left the Dominican Republic. It
Okay.
happened while I was writing the book. And
Okay.
when I was writing Legitimate Kid, I was very angry at one point. And and during my rewrites, because I was like, yo, is this just going to be flames? Am I just going to set the whole world on fire because I'm hurting?
Yeah.
Right. And then my evolution was happening in real time. And I just remember saying, I was so offended by the way that he responded to me coming there that I never thought about the circumstances that made him behave that way in the first place. Because I was
Hmm.
thinking about me. And I'm like, okay, I come to the Dominican Republic, with a camera crew from HBO Max. I have security, I have a driver, I'm staying in a nice hotel. Everything is set out for me, COVID test, because this was during COVID. And my dad is living with my sister who just lost his partner during COVID, and he had to go live with my sister. She was his caretaker. And I'm sitting there like mad that he's like looking at me like a resource. because I
Mm.
was so caught up with myself that I didn't realize that he was struggling. And that was the part of his entire life's journey, has been struggling, living in a country that has been, impoverished and also under the subjugation of like political powers and all of that stuff. So when I when I sat down to write the book, and I was like, damn, I never even thought about that. I was able to say, this is a three-dimensional experience, and I've only been looking at it from one perspective. And I need to sit down and think about what all of this means to everybody if I want to be a part of this. Now, if I want to just go about my business, I can just be like, you know what? He abandoned me. That was trash. I'm out. And I'm still justified in that too, because I did get abandoned. But
Right.
I didn't want that to be my human experience, because for me, I demand more of myself. And also, I did want to have some sort of empathy for my father. And so I did sit down and think about, and I talked to his sister, and I talked to my siblings that did grow up with him. And I talked to my mother when my mother calmed down. And, he did have a hard life, because there was something that happened that made him feel unloved and whatever it was. But I had to sit down and think about him as a younger person and what his life must have been like, as opposed to, mine.
Now, how does this change your experience now as an adult, and like how this shows up for you in your relationships?
You know, I've been accused of always being too empathetic. Like, and there in reading about narcissism, because I was in a relationship with a narcissist.
Hmm.
I've been in several relationships with several narcissists.
Right.
I um I learned that sometimes, even when you are when you have this complex of being morally superior to others, or that, thinking that always extending empathy is, higher than not,
Right.
that is also a form of narcissism. And so I had learned that I learned to compensate in life by always extending people grace and feeling like I had to take care of other people. And so for me in this moment, I was like, this is what I always do. I always extend grace. I always try to look from the other perspective. I always give people the benefit of the doubt, because I'm a people pleaser. I had to really sit down and think about what this all meant in my life.
Hmm.
And it worked in the reverse. Like, I decided that I needed to become a little bit more selfish and a little bit more, you know, I don't know if it's selfish, but self first, and be able to put myself
Mm.
first, because they would take me down if I give a little piece to everybody. That's just how I am. I'll give a little piece to everybody and then realize I don't have anything for myself. And the only way that I'm going to be able to continue to give people a piece of something is if I got it, if I can get it. Now, if I don't nourish myself, I don't have the energy to go do the work. So I had to just, I came back from the Dominican Republic. My relationship that I had been in ended, and I took myself out of dating, and I did a trauma therapy program. And I was like, this I will learn from. This is where all of it started. This wound is what fed all of those relationships, friendships, relationships in my family, romantic relationships. All of that comes from that wound, and how I operate, my unfulfilled need of being validated, feeling like I belong, feeling legitimate. And so I've been taking care of myself. And being able to meet, I met a man, and very attractive, charming, successful. And even with all of that, I was able to say, oh, that's not healthy for me. um let me politely excuse myself from this. And being able to do it a couple of times, which is something I wouldn't do, because I got that Muhammad Ali. Like, they used to say, Muhammad Ali said he would be with somebody, and then he said, his eyes would fall in love with someone else and then his heart would soon follow. And I was like, oh, that romantic ideal about what love is. And I had to just be like, hey, what you doing?
Yeah.
You want to go down this road again? And so I've been able to do that, and it's really new for me, but it has been put into practice where I was never able to do that before. I was too addicted to needing to feel loved, and anybody who came in the right packaging would be able to provide that for me.
In what ways then would you say you are learning how to love yourself? Like, what was that process like?
My therapist told me that little me was really angry, and she was like, you have to take care of little you, because little you will fuck up your life, will
Yeah.
show up and then boom. So I remember just laying in my bed and watching Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, like,
Yeah.
and I ordered chicken McNuggets with French fries, and I laid in my bed, which I was never allowed to do as a kid because I could never eat in the room. And
Right,
I
right.
did in my bedroom, and I broke the rules, and I just gave little Aida, I was Aidita. I was like giving her just that moment where I remember watching Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer as a kid in the midst of chaos, and just shut up, let me watch it. I don't want to just being able to do that in peace. Just
Mm-hmm.
really tending to little me, um, you know, just basic stuff, but doing other things, spiritual things, turning on lighting candles for my ancestors and just remembering them and the sacrifices that they made. Sitting down and praying, getting a massage, making time for things that I've always told myself, I got to keep going. I got to keep going. I got to keep going. But those things are the things that give me the energy to keep going, and being able to say no to things that appear to be great. That, like, one of the things I've been really working on is that FOMO. It's just really, really
Yeah.
valuing what's important in my life and being able to tell myself it's okay if you don't go to an Oscar party. That doesn't validate you. To be able to
Right.
say that out loud, because you are being told constantly by the industry, you need to be there, you need to be seen, they need to see you with this person. And just really putting that stuff into perspective and saying, what you need to do as an artist is art, and everything else
Mm-hmm.
will fall in place. But being able to do those things, and then just understanding what forgiveness meant for me. That's the biggest form of self-care for me, is forgiveness. Understanding, because my understanding of forgiveness as a child was that you have to tolerate, right? Which is not what forgiveness is at all. Forgiveness for me is just being able to forgive a person for the things that they've done to me, but at the same time being able to say, but I don't mean I mess with you anymore. Like, we're not friends,
I still
because
got my boundaries.
it's for me. It's that forgiveness is self-care. Is letting that let setting that away and letting the universe and the Most High deal with it so that I can get on with my life. And just understanding that it is not weakness. It is actually strength to be able to say, I forgive you and I send you on your way. Thank you for getting me here, because I've learned the lesson. And
That's right.
now it's time to release you out into the world. Ashe. And being able to do that has been the most beautiful thing for me.
You know what has worked for me, and I've said it on past episodes, but breath work.
Oh, yeah.
Breath work for me has been life changing.
Yeah.
Like once I go into like doing like a breath work ceremony, and I tapped in with my younger self, and I just cried. Like I
Mhm.
couldn't even hold it in. And
Yeah.
I just remember like giving like little me a hug. Like, I am so sorry, girl. Like,
Mhm.
we fucked up, but we gonna get you back, girl. We gonna get you back. Because,
Yeah.
it is a journey that you have to go through. I know in one of your past interviews, you mentioned that you didn't think you would make it past 30.
Mm-mm.
Why?
I grew up in the midst of doom. I saw a lot of death. My school We lost like 17 kids the whole time I was there, and it was like random deaths. It felt like the movie Final Destination. It was one drowned, one got shot, one got killed on the bus, two ended up murdered on the freeway, like all this stuff that was happening. And, just always feeling this sense of doom, this I remember crying when I turned 30, and just people were like, "Oh, she's sad because she's 30." And I'm like, no, I'm actually joyful because I'm 30, because I made it. I didn't think I was going to get here. While you are, you know, uh, falling into the guises of the traps of capitalism, thinking you're old because you're 30, because now they're telling you you're old when you're 30 because they want to sell you eye creams and, get you to spend money. I am sitting there saying, thank you for letting me be here and continue to, you know, just interact with the most important experiences of my life. And um, it was really like, after I got past the crying and the shock, I felt invincible. And I started doing stand up. And I was like, I can do anything I want to do. And I started doing comedy. And I was like, people were like, you gotta do comedy at 30. And I'm like, I was in a bathroom, in a public bathroom, and I was with one of my friends, and we were talking about age, and one of my friends were like, I mean, we old bitches now, right? She was saying that. And there was this lady in there that had to be maybe in her 70s. And she
Mhm.
was like, well, si ustedes son vieja, yo estoy muerta, you know? And I was like, wow. She was like, if you're old, then I'm dead.
Then
And
I'm dead. Yep.
I was like, my apologies. Forgive my friend for her, ridiculous words. You are not dead. You are beautiful. I bow down to you. I was like, say la mano. Cause I was
Mhm.
like, wow, we have no respect for life. If it doesn't come in a certain packaging, and it's so toxic, because I see a lot of young people calling people old on the internet. And I'm like, bro, wait till you turn 40. You're going to feel it. And then when somebody calls you old, and it's like, I didn't grow up like that. I grew up idolizing my grandmother and thinking
That's
she was
right.
like the dopest being on the planet. I was like, yo, my abuela is fire.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's just, I just have this great appreciation for being here yet another day, and being able to say I'm still here, and being okay with where I am, because I remember when I was 7, and I remember 27 was like my most lit year, right? And
Yeah.
I remember being a teenager, and I remember my 20s and my 30s, and I was like, I'm enjoying every moment where I am, and I'm like, man, I just hope I keep going, because I want to experience it all and say, oh man, I want to be able to one day say, man, my 80s were like, bro. And so, I just feel like that turning point for me, 30 was a turning point for me, because I just was hearing so much about what 30 meant, and I had no idea. And being on the other side of it, I was like, damn, I didn't know anything. I really didn't know anything until I turned 30. And I was doing it with children. Like, I had kids, and
Um,
it's my kids are now, like, I can't believe you did this with 2 children. Like, my daughter was like, I can't even have a dog.
it, it's crazy because, again, back to my therapy sessions, I remember like kind of being angry at my mother. My mother has 4 kids.
Yeah, mine just.
And I was talking hella shit in my therapy session, and my therapist was like, your mom was a superhero. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, you
Yeah.
gotta, like, she did this when she was so young, and like, she held you guys down. She was a single mother. Like, you need to really reframe your thinking of how you're really looking at your mom. And I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Cause if I was my mom, yeah, I don't think I could do it. So there
Yeah.
is like a newfound appreciation for my mom. I wonder, do you have any regrets? Would you have done anything differently?
Oh yeah, I think it's a lie to say we don't have regrets.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I think people love to really big themselves up and say, I have no regrets. I have many regrets, you know.
Ditto.
Um,
Ditto.
yeah, I do. There are people I would run away from. I would never date. I would just go the other way. I would just peacefully and graciously bow out. You know, there are events that I wouldn't have seen out of fear. There were things I was a very young girl with a baby, and I had the opportunity to go to Milan and model, and I didn't go because I was afraid. It was really the all the social implications in my culture and my surroundings of people saying you're a bad mother if you go to Milan and leave your son with your mother, because what kind of mother does that? And now in retrospect, it would have been the mother that wanted a better life for her son. I would have went and got that money and and dealt with some stuff, and I would have also fulfilled my own dream as a person that wanted to do that, but I was guilted into not doing it because I was told, well, you shouldn't have had that baby. And I just think that's a very toxic attitude to have. It is, even when you have children, that doesn't mean you stop living. In addition to that, you want to teach your kids to go pursue their dreams. They don't have to be the sacrifice. You have people in your life that will support you and love you. And so yeah, there are a lot of things I regret. I'm not even gonna lie.
Yeah.
It's a
You
bunch
know,
of few people I would never, and, and not just men, but even friendships. It was just people that were not good for me. People I would not, I would have forgiven in the way that I forgive now and still maintain my distance.
right,
There are places I would not have gone and experienced trauma and fear. And there are things that I would never do, and I absolutely would not do them if I had a chance not to do them. And knowing what I know now.
right. I wanna get into the comedy. Um, One thing I love about you, and I don't know if you've ever heard this about yourself, but it's just the way that I receive you as a comedian. Um, you kind of make me help digest the truth a little bit sweeter. And I don't know if that's something that you've ever heard, but you will say the truth, but the way you say it, it's like it is the truth, but the way I'm digesting it, it's like, okay, like I laugh about it.
Yeah.
The only other comedian that has made me feel that way is Dave Chappelle. Like
Oh,
he's very much that comedian that he'll say worst case scenarios, but he says it in such a funny way that you're like, I can laugh through this hurt. I can laugh
yeah.
through this pain. Um, and so a lot of people say that usually comedy stems from the pain of it all. And I
Mhm.
wonder if that is where you gain your inspiration for some of your jokes and how you take us through this journey of comedy.
Yeah, I use a lot of personal experience to tackle social issues. For me, that's what my way in is, because it's easy to be like, you know what, slavery was wrong, and slave racism is this, and this is this. But putting it into perspective about how it affected me and growing up gives me a whole different way take. A lot of my comedy does come from my pain, being able to heal it and talk about things that other people have experienced, and that through laughter it might be a little bit more palatable instead of
Yes.
having a real trauma session. And then some of my comedy just comes from my observations of things that I think is funny. Like I'm working on a joke right now about how I feel like all the mirrors in my house are alive, and some of them like me and some of them don't. Because you get in front of one mirror, like the mirror right here. This mirror makes you look like you are Beyonce, in
Right.
her new photo shoot for that country album. And then I have a mirror in my room that mirror does not like me, and that mirror makes me feel like Ryan Reynolds and Best Friends. Like all doughy and stuff. I'm like, I didn't even know I had these lines, and it's just observations. And it's just really funny about how I feel that way about, I feel like some things are like designed to take me down. And like even, Siri, like when I ask for directions, she always sends me like into the worst neighborhood, most dangerous. And I'm like, she's trying to get me killed. Like I feel like there's a against me. But some of it is just observational stuff, and some of it does come from my personal experiences. And I've been able to blend the two, and that's just my style of comedy. And I feel like, yeah, a lot of it does come from my pain.
Yeah. I want to talk about representation. That's a huge thing in the community. And some
Mhm.
people define it as they're not alone in this experience, right? How do you define representation?
You know, representation is a spectrum. And the reason why we're so upset is because we never get to see our spectrum. We get to
Mm,
see one little, glimpse of what can we have drug dealers that are Latinos, Latina, right? People.
mm-hmm.
We have single mothers that are Latina. We have we definitely have Puerto Rican women who do carry knives. My mother was one who stabbed somebody with an
Yeah.
ice pick. At the same time, I have una tia that has her bachelor's degree, who's never been in a fight. She's a housewife and an educator, and she is very, very, very posh, and the way that she behaves. And those women are related. They love each other. They respect one another. They're also very different in the way they handle things. So when we see ourselves in media, there's always just one representation. And when they make us lawyers, they water us down. They take our Puerto Ricanness, our Dominicanness, because being a lawyer means you're white like, as opposed to you can be a Puerto Rican lawyer who has her Puerto Rican flag in her house and listens to music and did very well on the bar. But we just
Mm-hmm.
don't have a spectrum. So representation is important because the way that we see ourselves in, is very important in how we feel about ourselves, right?
That's
Media
right.
has the most impact. That's why a lot of people from politics have switched over to media, because they're like, if I want to make a difference, I have to impact the way people see themselves. So I have to impress upon the images that we have in media. And also, it informs the way other people see us. And even though we're like, well, I don't care what other people think about us, when you're in the position of you are surrounded by a group of people who outnumber you, and if you live in New Mexico or you live in Montana or North Dakota, and all those people see, law enforcement, city officials, your neighbors, all they see is images of you being drug dealers and murderers and dangerous on television, and that's the only introduction that they have to us. It impacts the way they treat us. So
Absolutely.
representation is important, not just for, entertainment purposes, but also for our safety and our humanity to be preserved and protected. And it's very impactful in the way that people see us, and those powers that be that are evil, they know it, and that's why they use media for the negative. And people think that, it don't you isn't it amazing how when people talk about immigration, they only talk about Latinos, they only talk about Latine, as if
Mm-hmm.
people from Eastern Europe don't come here, or Asia, or other places in the world. It's always the people of color who they deem to be the most dangerous.
Absolutely. And I was also thinking while you were talking, but I find it troubling when I see movies and I'll see like Dasha Polanco, right? Dominican. Or I'll see like Mexicans, and I'm referring to Orange is the New Black, of course. And we
Hmm.
play prisoners,
Hmm.
right? And I'm just like, so no Latino's gonna play like a successful entrepreneur. We're not gonna play like the president. Like we're just not gonna have those roles. To me, that bothers me, because usually when you see movies about us, it's always the person that causes the trouble, not the person that's solving the issues. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You know what? So Orange is the New Black is a very unique case. The woman who created that show is a white woman. Her name is Genji Cohen. She created the show Weeds.
Mm-hmm.
And her her angle is always making women badasses, right? So in Weeds, this white woman who is a suburban mom becomes a drug dealer in her neighborhood because her husband dies and she has to survive, and that's the only way she knows how to survive. The one thing about Orange is the New Black that I will say, they're all in prison. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
the women are all in prison, the white women, the Russian,
Yeah.
they're all in prison. That's the first time I had ever seen that diverse representation of Latinidad that I had never seen before with, the Puerto Ricans, the Dominicans, the Colombians. They're not all one thing. The
Right.
woman who's the warden is Latina. She's a white Latina, but she's Latina nonetheless, the evil Latina. But
Yeah.
I'm fine with Orange is the New Black existing so long as there's a Grey's Anatomy to go with it where we can be doctors and we can be lawyers and we can be, because there are women that are in prison and we don't humanize the prison experience for women, and we don't know what it's like because every time we see prison stuff it's about men.
Hmm.
And I think it was important to see what prison life was for women and how it worked and how racism worked in there, because we'd never humanized the prison experience. But as and that's all fine and dandy so long as we can also have us playing, because it feels like that's the only thing. And that
Right.
is why it's such a problem, because if that show would have been all white women and they would have been there, the argument would have been like, why aren't there any women of color in here? You know what I mean? But
Right. Right.
it's also just very important that we have that spectrum, and that's why I talk about it, because like Succession. I'm sure there's a Latino family, Latinx family, Latinx family that has a lot of money, that has an influence, and that they have champagne problems, as what people call them. But those
Right.
problems that they had were problems we could all relate to. This one hates his brother. They're jealous. He loves his sister more. He's going to give this to this one. And we don't have that. And that's where the greater problem is for me.
How do we change it?
Ooh, girl, I've been working on that for
I
years.
know. I know.
I've been working on it for
I feel
years.
like that's such a loaded question, right? But you do have to be in the inside to change it. And yes, I'm in your own way, you are changing it.
Well, we're working on it, and it's accountability. And unfortunately for us, a lot of the Latinos, the Latina people, they are the ones that are our biggest problem, especially the ones who can assimilate into white culture. They do. And then they turn around
Right.
and do to us what the white supremacists do to us. And it is
Right.
so unfair. Sometimes we are our biggest problems. We have a lot of people who have power, they have position, they have influence. They're so preoccupied with themselves that they trade their power for visibility. They rather be the star of a movie and star of a show instead of thinking about the movement and what that would do to later make them the star of the movie and the show. They won't self-sacrifice. And so it's been very difficult. I think that instead of fighting the industry, because the industry is going to be the industry, I think putting ourselves in the position of being the people who can assist in solving the problem and saying, let me help you because you don't know it. Because, attacking them just makes them defensive. And now there is no In the Heights, right? Now there is no other movie. There's not been another studio movie of Latinos since In
Right.
the Heights, because now they're like, I'm not touching it, right? There aren't any TV shows. In addition to that, like, we talk a lot, but we don't, what people were like using Gina Torres as a poster child for Afro Latinidad. And I remember when her video went viral, Gina has
Yeah.
been in existence for a long time. And I never saw anybody supporting her until it became on trend. But her show
Right.
was on air and nobody watched it, and it got canceled because she didn't get we would have loved to have seen the activity on that streamer that we saw on Twitter about using her as see, and it was just rooted in nothing that was real, because the reality of it is we have a show right now. You support it. You show up and you support it, right? Will Trent is a show with a Puerto Rican man that's the lead of the show. It got
Hmm.
renewed for the third season yesterday because 70 million people, millions of people have watched that show. It's a Puerto Rican man, two Black women. There's an Asian woman, like that. There's diversity in that show. But the lead of that show is Ramon Rodriguez.
Hmm.
And I guarantee you that if they pulled the numbers, the majority of the people watching that show are not Latina. I guarantee you it's
Mm.
everybody else. But we're ready to fight. No, there's no Latino shows. There's no, but we don't support. And I think the
Right.
way you do it is you show up in numbers, and then you hold people accountable and say, this is the equity that we have. We will
Right.
show up. But if we don't get what we want, this won't happen again. But the
It's
minute
interesting.
you burn it down, it's over.
But it's interesting that you say that because I feel like we're going through like a second kind of Latin explosion, right? Like we went through that first one where it was like the J Lo, the Ricky Martin, and now you have like the Bad Bunny, but now it's even deeper than that because now you have like real influencers that you can touch. Monet McMichael was one of those people that she is, Puerto Rican and Black. but she has a huge influence and people do gravitate towards her. We have people like you that you actually show up for your other entrepreneurs, people that are killing the game, other actors, and we see you all the time showing up, showing out, and supporting. So this second wave where it seems like we're showing up, but then also if I'm hearing you correctly, it's like we're still not showing up.
Yeah, we
So
have to show
what is
numbers. We have to do
mm-hmm,
the numbers. We have to, we'll go see the Fast and the Furious because we do show up for that move, that franchise. They have the numbers to prove it. We show up for
mm-hmm,
Fast and the Furious. We like to show up for stuff when it's already tried and true. We will show up. J Lo has 300 million plus followers. We complain about J Lo, but she has 300 million plus followers. If the people who you want to get the elevation that J Lo has doesn't have 300 million followers,
that's
so
right.
why don't you support? You support what's already established, was already famous, very popular amongst our culture. Like we love what's already famous. We love what's already popular. We love to support white America because we so desperately want to be seen by them. Not all of us, but many. And
Mm-hmm.
so the way that we show up is we have to put our dollars into our people. The music industry has done a really good job to show how viable we are and bringing dollars. Bad Bunny and Daddy Yankee and
Mm-hmm.
pero you hear we have to be able to, that has to translate into other things. And it's, the white supremacy is real. Like they love to elevate the artists that look like them, that most likely fit the phenotype that they admire and respect. But white people gonna support white people, but we
Right.
have to show up for the people who don't look like that. And you know, I I'm fine with understanding that I have privilege as a Latina in my in the way that I show up. There are darker people than me that suffer and struggle. So I use my way to open the doors for them so that they can have a platform. I just think we have so much envidia in our culture. It's cultural for us. Even we'll say, oh, yo no soy envidiosa, pero yes, you are. La
Yeah,
gente que
because you only think there could only be one when there's so many of us.
Yeah, and that's not true. And education, being able to education is the power. That's the strength. When people have information, they have power. And a lot of people don't have information. So, you know, we're like in this place, like I'm in the industry and I talk to these people and they're like, ooh, we're scared of that. We don't want that backlash. As
Mm-hmm.
opposed to, you know, going to Lin Manuel and saying, hey, you got power, you have influence. We're willing to throw this behind you, but we need some things from you. But
Right.
you sit down and you have a conversation with them. And I don't know if it's that easy because I can't call Lynn. I don't know. I mean, I know him, but I can't pick up the phone and call him. But
Right.
there's somewhere in that place where we have to let the industry know how much power we have. And if it's watered
Right.
down, we don't have it.
Who do you think is doing it right in this industry, particularly in the Latin industry, that is showing up, extending the olive branch?
I
Who
don't
would
know.
you?
When I think about it, I could name a bunch of people who Hollywood and other Latinos. The thing about Latinos is the anti-blackness in Latino is really bothersome to me.
Mm-hmm.
So when they push this Latine thing about, oh, look at the Latinos are doing it, you only see a certain type of person and they look a certain way, and you look at the pictures and they got one black friend, and it's really annoying to me
Mm-hmm.
because it's elitist and it feels disingenuous. I remember people talking so much shit about Lupita Nyong'o before she won an Oscar and saying that she wasn't Latina. She calls herself a Chilonga because she's from Mexico City, and they were like,
Mm-hmm.
she's not a Chilonga, she's this, she's that. And after she won that Oscar, they were like, "Oh, we love Lupita. Look at our Latina queen. Now she's on all the blogs, and they put her picture, and it feels disingenuous." And
Yeah.
I mean, obviously with her too, you don't ever see her reposting that foolishness because she knows what they did to her before. You know, Jarrell Jerome, like out here killing it, you know, and Dominican, and just it's like it just is this tone deafness of wanting to be, you know, white people to like you so much. And it's like the white people who are good people and real people gonna like you if you like yourself, bitch. Like you ain't
Mm,
gotta lick
period.
boo. You know what I mean? They like people who like themselves. If they only like you if you're pandering, then they don't really like you. Newsflash, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when I think about the people who the people who are doing it, I would say is like the people who hire Gina Torres, whoever that is, that keep her, they keep her visible because she's a good actress and they keep her out there. You know, like Elvis Nolasco, who's in The Godfather of Harlem, who was in Crime, like who is out here doing good work. And Forrest Whitaker is like, yeah, this guy's good. Like, I want this guy here, you know, or whoever it is on The Godfather of Harlem that made that decision. Like, I think representation matters within our own community. It's like, you know, ¿dónde está la China Dominicana? You know, like, ¿dónde está, where are those people? Where is that? That's what real representation is for me. And the people who are doing that, you know, I don't like to demonize people because people really do try. And I think they're trying and they have blind spots. I think Gloria Calderon Kelly, when she did, you know, that show on Amazon, she had a black woman on the show, que era la prima. That's a trans
Mm-hmm.
woman, which I thought was, estaba, you know, Romeo's on the show. Like, that's how you do it, is like you actually show it. You don't just talk about it and take pictures with people at a brunch. You actually do it. And so I think she's
Agreed.
one of the people that's really trying, and she's learned, and people have called her and say, hey, and she's like, all right, well, let's do it. And then she did it, you know, and she put Andre, she put Romeo, you know, she put them in that show, and it was, it didn't feel fake. You were like, they could be cousins, they could be love interests, they could be Puerto
Yeah.
Rican. It's not, you know, it because you live it. So I think,
Right.
you know, when I think about it, I'm like, there are very few people who I really think are trying because they're afraid.
Yeah. There is a lot of fear stemmed in a lot because if I feel like what it takes to actually stand out, step out, and speak up for us,
Mhm.
you do think of what are the consequences for that, you know? So I think if it was more of us actually stepping out and creating these spaces for us, then like you said, there's, you know, numbers don't lie. So if we show up, we good. But
Absolutely.
if we like in the little corner, it's like, come on now, what are we doing? How are we really? But the word that I like to use is disruptive.
Yeah.
How are we being disruptive within our community? And not disruptive in a bad way, but in a way
No,
that makes impact.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, I know we have to wrap up, but I just want to keep you around for a little longer.
Okay.
Two more questions. What is your favorite era in comedy?
I would say my favorite era in comedy. Oh, I don't know if I don't think I was around for it. I mean, I would say maybe like I wasn't watching it. I was too little, but I think when Richard Pryor and George
Ah,
Carlin,
so
like
good. Yeah.
the era of comedy where there was no social media and comedians were just really doing the work to go out there and tell the stories. Yeah, those are, you know, it's funny when you ask people who their favorite comedians are, Richard Pryor's still on the list. So that says a lot about him
Absolutely.
because so many generations have come along since and he's still on the list. So that has to be goals, you know, like, you know, George Carlin, Lucy, you know, like
Yes.
people that in spite of like a woman that was told you can't do this, she did it. She was doing it. She was like, I'm gonna do it, you know, and I think that era of comedy was just really, it was really inspiring. You know, that with the evolution of the people in today with that type of gumption, I think could go really far.
And what advice would you give new comedians or just anyone that's trying to follow in your footsteps as an entrepreneur?
Well, I will say comedy is not just about making people laugh. And it certainly isn't about making your friends laugh and your group laugh. It's about making a lot of people who don't think the same, that don't come from the same places, laugh. And I think that, social media has deluded a lot of people into thinking that they're comedians because they have a following. And that's not what makes you a comedian. Even if you making a million, millions of dollars and you selling out arenas, your audiences are usually pop culture audiences. Those are the people that consume pop culture and media, and it's all the same to them, right? It's like they get their music, they get all their entertainment is just this pop cultural experience where they're not really comedy connoisseurs, right? There's the comedy
Mhm.
connoisseurs, and then there are the pop culture enthusiasts. And a real comedian seeks out the comedy connoisseurs. They're the ones that want to be prolific, they want their jokes to live on. So I think that if you are new in comedy, you should inspect yourself and your mind and your thinking as to why you want to do it. Because a lot of people just are trying comedy now because they're trying to find the easy way to get famous and popular. And that doesn't have longevity. You can be famous and popular, but what is it? What are you concerned with legacy? Do you want to be prolific? Do you want to make an impact? So I think it's really understanding why you want to do stand up. And if you do, to really do the work and just be yourself, because you're going to eventually be yourself anyway, no matter how much you try to be somebody else, and not quit. Just keep going. If you really wanted to do comedy because you love comedy, then don't quit, because
Yes.
it takes time. And no matter how famous you get, when you get on stage and you got to deliver an hour of comedy to people, there's no cheating to get to that. There's no way to cheat it.
Yeah. And that audience, boy, they don't lie either. They gonna let you know.
They will not.
All right. We're gonna go into our rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. Tell me you're Latina without telling me you're Latina.
I put Vapuru on my burn.
Yes. Yes. What does it mean to you to be a Latina?
It means that I am the wildest dream of an ancestor that at one point never dreamed that a little Latina, little Puerto Rican Dominican girl would ever be on HBO, be on, Netflix. So what it means to me is magic.
Yes. What's one thing you need in the morning?
One thing that I need in the morning is, what do I wake up to every morning? It's not cafe. It's not.
Really? It's not?
No. You know what? After my grandmother died, it's been really hard for me to drink cafe con leche because she's the only one that would make it perfect for me.
Yeah.
But I think that what I need every morning when I wake up is to know that my family is okay. Like that's
Mm.
what I reach for initially, is knowing that my kids are fine, my mother's fine, my siblings are fine. Like that is how my day goes. Like as I wake up and I'm like, I say thank you every morning when I wake up, and just knowing that my people are good, I'm like, all right, I can get going today.
What is something that you would want to work on that you haven't worked on already?
Um, I think the one thing that I want to work on is that I haven't been working on is just being able to relax. I have a hard time relaxing without guilt, and I
Hmm.
keep saying I'm gonna start working on it, but I haven't, and I would like to conquer that, and sooner than later.
Girl, you need to meditate.
I know. I can. Girl, I'll be meditating. I'll be like, where the clothes at? What am I
Your
doing?
mind be roaming.
Did I take out the, like, it's so, I mean, I'm working on it.
If you had the opportunity to have the Last Supper with three Latinas, dead or alive, who would they be?
um, my grandmother, um, Celia Cruz,
Love.
and my great grandmother on my father's side, who I never met, my Dominican great grandmother, my Puerto Rican grandmother, and Celia Cruz.
What is this chapter of your life called?
It is called, I just said it yesterday. This chapter of my life is called Renaissance.
Ooh, I love that. And finish this sentence. Growing up Latina is.
Growing up Latina is having the magic of, you know what, having a power, an untapped power that once you discover what it is, you're unstoppable.
Yes. Aida Rodriguez, thank you so much for coming on the show. I
Thank
really
you for
appreciate
having
your
me.
time. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
this has been great. I've done
Thank you.
two podcasts with my people today and yesterday, and they've been the best experiences. So thank you for having me,
Thank
and
you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Much success to you.
To you too. I look forward to hearing
Thank
all
you.
about it.